a painting that millions of people have laid eyes on across the past 500 years. Historians have examined it. Scientists have run scans over it. It went through a restoration process lasting 21 years, and it was even captured at a breathtaking 16 billion pixel resolution. Yet even after all of that, nobody managed to notice the secret buried beneath its layers of paint. Then a new player enters the picture. Artificial intelligence, a machine that detected strange markings in that very spot, leaving researchers genuinely stunned. They believe these are no ordinary blemishes, but a hidden message deliberately left behind by Leonardo da Vinci himself. And if that turns out to be accurate, we may need to look at the world's most celebrated painting from an entirely different angle. But the biggest question remains, what was the message Da Vinci concealed from the world 500 years ago? And why has it taken so many centuries for a machine to finally be able to read it? Make sure you stick with us all the way to the end, because the final message uncovered by AI has split the entire world into two opposing camps. Before we go any further into this remarkable story, don't forget to hit subscribe. Now, the real question is, if Leonardo da Vinci truly had an idea with the power to change the world, why didn't he simply write or speak about it openly? Why did he feel compelled to conceal his own thoughts? The truth is, Leonardo had a very peculiar habit. Most of his personal notebooks were not written in ordinary handwriting, but in reverse. If you attempt to read them the normal way, they make almost no sense at all. You have to hold them up in front of a mirror to make them out. Today, this practice is known as mirror writing. Some people think he wrote this way because he was left-handed and wanted to stop the ink from smearing, but many historians believe there was something deeper going on beyond mere convenience. They are convinced a greater secret was concealed behind this habit. His notebooks contain far more than reversed writing. They are packed with tiny hidden symbols, his own personal shorthand, and geometric sketches that even modern researchers struggle hard to interpret. It almost feels as though he was intentionally locking his ideas away from the world. The world surrounding him was also very different from ours. During that era, the Catholic Church held tremendous influence throughout Europe. If someone dared to question religious doctrine or attempted to explain the world in a new way, it could bring serious and dangerous consequences. Years later, Galileo was confined to house arrest for claiming that the earth moves, and Giordano Bruno was burned alive for his ideas. Leonardo understood all of this perfectly well. He likely recognized that certain things were simply not safe to say out loud. So rather than placing his thoughts into books or speeches, he may have chosen to conceal them within his artwork. Perhaps for him, a painting was never just a work of art, but a secret message, waiting quietly for the right moment to be found. Maybe that is why people still say today, Leonardo could not speak freely, so he buried his secrets inside his paintings. The peculiar painting technique of the Last Supper. In the year 1495, on a wall inside the Santa Maria delle Grazie monastery in Milan, Italy, Leonardo da Vinci began work on his most celebrated masterpiece, The Last Supper. But the approach he chose for this particular work is now widely believed to be the very reason such a great mystery exists. At that time, most artists relied on the traditional fresco technique. In this process, paint was applied directly onto wet plaster, allowing the colors to permanently bond with the wall surface. But Leonardo chose not to follow that method. Instead, he devised his own approach by combining oil and tempera paints and applying them onto dry plaster. This gave him the freedom to achieve incredibly fine and delicate details. However, it also created a serious problem. Within just a few short years, the painting began to deteriorate. The colors started peeling away in numerous places, and many people came to regard it as Leonardo's greatest mistake. Some researchers today, however, believe this may have actually been his most brilliant trick, because applying paint in multiple layers over dry plaster created distinct layers within the wall itself. If something had been written beneath the surface and then covered over with paint, it could have stayed concealed from the world for hundreds of years. The most astonishing aspect is that this painting survived not just the wear of time, but also the devastation of World War II. In 1943, when intense bombing leveled the surrounding area, the Last Supper somehow remained intact. It is told that a barrier of sandbags constructed around it prevented the work from being entirely wiped out. So how did science begin peering inside paintings? The real question was, If a hidden secret truly existed within this painting, how would anyone ever go about finding it? Nobody could simply crack open a 500-year-old wall and take a look inside. Scientists, therefore, turned toward technology for answers. In 1978, a large-scale restoration effort for The Last Supper got underway. The task was handed to the renowned restoration specialist, Pininfarina Bartolon. This was no short-term undertaking. For a full 21 years, her team painstakingly cleaned and studied the painting with extraordinary care. The work was finally completed in 1999. Throughout this process, researchers employed a range of modern technologies. Using infrared reflectography, they attempted to see beneath the painted surface. X-ray analysis allowed them to identify places where Leonardo had made revisions during the creation of the piece. These scans brought to light old sketches, early brushwork, and countless fine details that were completely invisible to the naked eye. Technology continued advancing with each passing year. In 2007, the entire painting was digitally scanned once more. The resolution this time was extraordinarily high, captured at close to 16 billion pixels. This meant researchers could zoom deep into even the tiniest corners of the wall and examine them with remarkable precision. In addition to this, hyperspectral imaging was employed. This technique examines colors and surface layers across different wavelengths of light. The process gathered an enormous volume of digital information, which was then carefully preserved in archives. For years afterward, researchers continued analyzing that data from every angle, hoping to uncover what it might be concealing. Yet one significant problem persisted. They had billions of pixels, thousands of scans, and a massive body of scientific data at their disposal. What they lacked, though, was a mind capable of detecting the tiny patterns buried within all of it. Human eyes can catch a great deal, but certainly not everything. And perhaps that is precisely why one crucial element was missing most of all at that moment: artificial intelligence, the AI project, and Rossi's 8 years of relentless effort. By this point, scientists had scanned every layer of the painting. They had 16 billion pixel images, hyperspectral imaging data, and thousands of digital records sitting safely in archives. But one question still hung in the air: if Leonardo had genuinely concealed a message, who was going to be able to read it? That is the moment when Dr. Rossi and her team stepped into the picture. Rossi believed that while human eyes might never recognize it, a machine very well could. She set about constructing a neural network trained specifically to interpret Leonardo da Vinci's handwriting. Thousands of samples drawn from his well-known mirror writing, aged notebooks, and manuscripts such as the Codex Arundel were loaded into the system so the AI could absorb his distinctive style. This was far from a simple endeavor. Rossi dedicated a full 8 years of her life to the project. Many dismissed it as a pointless drain on time and resources. In 2016, a prominent institution outright rejected her research, stating she had no substantial evidence to support it. She took that rejection letter and pinned it to the wall of her laboratory. Some viewed it as a mark of defeat. For Rossi, however, it became her greatest fuel. It is said that on many nights she stayed behind in the lab rather than heading home. Her team continued feeding the archived scan data into the AI again and again without giving up. But every single time, all they discovered was noise, cracks in the plaster, and patterns left behind by deteriorating paint. The first day came and went, then the second, then a full week, yet nothing significant emerged. 2 weeks passed and the system had still not revealed anything new. Some team members had begun to believe that 8 years of grueling effort had genuinely been thrown away. But then something occurred that turned the entire story on its head. The 19th day arrived. That morning, the AI system suddenly flagged one particular area in red. It was a section of the wall directly behind the figure of Jesus Christ in the painting, where a darkened stain was clearly visible. At first, everybody assumed it was simply another unremarkable mark. But once the system completed its analysis, a figure appeared on the screen: 67%. According to the AI, this was no ordinary stain or patch of damaged plaster. There was a 67% probability that it could genuinely be part of a piece of handwriting deliberately made by a human hand. Rossi stared at that screen for several long moments. For weeks, she had sensed that something was off about that particular spot, though she had no evidence to back it up. Now, For the very first time, the machine was pointing in the same direction. She immediately reached out to the team's most seasoned imaging specialist, Marco Ferretti. Ferretti showed up at the lab before the sun had even risen. He studied the marks displayed on the screen and, without much hesitation, said, "This is not handwriting, it's just fluorescence, a pattern formed by minerals seeping out from within the plaster." But Rossi wasn't convinced. She pulled up an old sample of Leonardo's mirror writing on the same screen and began laying the two side by side. The curved forms and the gaps between them looked remarkably alike. Before long, a heated debate erupted inside the lab. Ferretti kept arguing that the team was simply seeing what it wanted to see. He described it as confirmation bias. In his view, people were transforming ordinary marks into a mystery just to validate their own theories. Gradually, the whole team divided into two camps. Some felt they were standing right on the threshold of the greatest discovery in all of history, while others were convinced it was nothing more than a misreading of the evidence. The tension in the room grew so thick that one of the junior researchers quietly slipped out without a word. By around 3 in the morning, the entire lab had emptied out. Only Rossi was left behind. She decided that this time she would not lean on the AI alone, but would upload a brand new scan into the system with her own hands. She loaded it in. The system began processing the data, and just a few seconds later, a fresh number started climbing onto the monitor. The confidence score on the screen began rising once more. After Rossi's manual scan, the whole mood inside the lab had shifted noticeably. Nobody was in any rush to head home. Over the following 72 hours, the computer kept working through different sections of the Last Supper. First the wall behind Jesus, then the shadowed area beneath the table, followed by the stone arches visible in the background, and finally the deep, heavy folds in the disciples' clothing. Everyone expected they might come across one or two peculiar marks, as before, but what actually appeared caught the entire team completely off guard. Nearly the same pattern began turning up in scan after scan. These marks were not scattered randomly across the painting. They consistently appeared in spots where the lighting was dim and where a restorer's brush had barely been able to reach for centuries. It almost seemed as though someone had deliberately concealed them in precisely those locations. The AI confidence score kept climbing too. It stood at 67% to begin with. Then the next scan concluded and showed 71%. A few hours later, the figure reached 78%. The team could no longer tear their eyes away from the screen, and when, on the third night, the system displayed 83%, the entire lab fell into complete silence for several breathless moments. The most astonishing part was that the AI was no longer simply detecting marks. It had begun linking those shapes together into structures that resembled letters, and they were not ordinary letters at all. The writing ran in reverse, precisely the way Leonardo had composed his well-known mirror script. Rossi immediately set those patterns against Leonardo's original notebooks, focusing particularly on the handwriting discovered in the Codex Arendal. The neural network continued comparing the two, and with every fresh round of analysis, the resemblance between them only grew stronger. Not long after, 3 distinct words appeared clearly on the screen. The first was umbra, which means shadow. The second was verita, which means truth. And the third was tradimento, which means betrayal. At this point, the people who had dismissed everything as nothing but damaged plaster were finding it increasingly difficult to explain things away. These no longer resembled ordinary stains. They felt more like broken fragments of a message that someone had deliberately written out. Marco Ferretti, who had opposed the entire idea from the start, was now standing directly before the screen. He did not turn toward Rossi, and he did not raise another objection. For several seconds, he simply stared at those 3 words. Up until now, the AI had uncovered a handful of isolated words, but nobody could figure out how they connected to one another. Were they just random marks scattered across the surface, or was something larger concealed behind them? For the next several hours, the system continued scanning those same sections over and over. Then the AI noticed something no human eye had ever caught before. It determined that the words had not been placed randomly across the wall at all. They were following a very specific path. When Rossi looked at the complete pattern displayed on the screen, even she went quiet for a moment. The pattern originated near the right hand of Jesus Christ and gradually spread outward in a circular motion. One after another, it moved across all 12 disciples. It appeared as though an invisible spiral had been embedded within the entire composition. When the mathematical examination of that spiral was finished, yet another remarkable detail surfaced. Its shape closely corresponded to the proportion the world recognizes as the golden ratio. This was the very same mathematical concept that had deeply captivated Leonardo throughout his life. That same proportion appears across many of his other paintings and sketches as well. The team was now beginning to wonder whether the AI was not simply uncovering handwriting, but rather an entire hidden structure. The words were not merely buried beneath the painting. They had been woven into its very geometry. It almost appeared as though Leonardo had concealed a complete document within the artwork itself. The AI began linking those scattered letters by tracing the spiral's path. Within seconds, a full sentence appeared on the screen for the very first time. Once translated, its meaning read something like this: "When light exposes the work of human hands, all faith begins to dissolve." Rossi read the sentence quietly to herself, but not a single person in the lab spoke. Everyone just kept their eyes fixed on the screen, because the weight of that one line felt remarkably profound. Taken at face value, it suggested that once the true nature of something is brought to light and people recognize it as a human creation, unquestioned belief starts to crumble. It was not a direct challenge to religion, but it certainly prompted reflection on whether accepting everything without questioning is genuinely the right approach. The most astonishing aspect was that this message had been concealed inside the very painting the world regards as one of the most sacred works in all of Christian art. If the AI's findings were accurate, it could suggest that Leonardo was not solely depicting a religious moment. Perhaps he was simultaneously leaving behind a secret commentary on human curiosity, reason, and the pursuit of truth. And that was the instant Rossi understood that the AI had not simply stumbled upon a few stray words. It may have begun uncovering Leonardo's concealed philosophy altogether. After that first complete sentence came to light, the entire team started to feel that none of this was likely to be mere coincidence. If one message could be hidden there, then could the other disciples also be concealing writings of their own? Driven by that thought, the AI went on reading through the spiral pattern. The first area it examined was the shadow positioned near Judas, the disciple the Bible identifies as the man who betrayed Jesus. After a brief moment of processing, another line emerged on the screen. Its meaning read, "The one who lives with truth never deceives himself." Rossi fell quiet for a moment. This message felt entirely unlike the traditional image most people held of Judas. It was almost as if Leonardo was urging people to look deeper into a person's truth before passing judgment. After that, the AI began connecting the hidden marks located beneath Peter. The translation that surfaced read, "Power without understanding is blind." That line, too, felt far from anything ordinary. It carried the sense that someone was saying strength and authority alone are never truly sufficient. They must be steered by wisdom and a deeper sense of understanding. But the most startling message of all was found near Thomas. In the Bible, Thomas was the disciple who refused to believe in the resurrection of Jesus until he had witnessed the proof with his very own eyes. The words the AI uncovered near him translated to mean asking questions is not a sin, but the path toward truth. That was the moment the entire story appeared to shift in a completely new direction. It felt as though these messages were nudging people away from blind acceptance and toward the use of reason. Faith itself was not being condemned, but there was a clear suggestion that accepting something without thought should never be the only path available. When Rossi viewed all of these messages side by side, she was reminded of another chapter in history. Roughly 250 years later, Europe stepped into the Age of Enlightenment. Voltaire spoke passionately about freedom of thought. Rousseau offered people an entirely new way of understanding human nature. Kant placed reason and intellect at the center of everything, and Diderot committed himself to spreading knowledge to all people. But now a pressing question emerged. The ideas that brought these great philosophers their fame during the 17th and 18th centuries, had Leonardo already concealed those very same ideas inside his painting back in 1497? If that turned out to be true, then perhaps Leonardo was not simply a little ahead of his era. Perhaps he carried a vision that was nearly 250 years beyond everyone else around him. By this point, the AI had already uncovered several small messages, but Rossi felt the story was still not whole. If Leonardo had truly embedded an entire message inside the painting, then its most vital part had to be waiting somewhere, yet to be found. The team chose to scan the deepest layers of the painting one more time. On this occasion, their focus fell directly on the robes of Jesus Christ. Numerous layers of color existed there, and the hyperspectral imaging was revealing some extremely faint marks that had previously been dismissed as nothing more than deteriorated paint. The AI slowly began joining those marks together. The entire lab watched the screen in total silence. A few minutes later, one final line appeared. Its meaning translated to, "Truth belongs to those who seek it, not only to those who are born into it." But the true surprise was still waiting to arrive. The AI suddenly began linking all the messages discovered beneath the various disciples into that same spiral pattern it had identified earlier. Starting from the hand of Jesus and moving one by one through all 12 disciples, the individual sentences gradually formed one continuous message. Just seconds later, a complete and unified idea appeared on the screen. Its meaning was something along the lines of, "Blind faith is the sleep of truth, and those who awaken will see what has always been concealed." Rossi read the line and stood in absolute silence for a long moment. She had devoted her entire life to trying to understand Leonardo's art. 22 years of research, endless papers, conferences, and debates. And now, standing right before her, was perhaps the greatest discovery of her entire career. But alongside that discovery came a deep and unsettling sense of fear. If this interpretation turned out to be accurate, it would not merely represent a fresh artistic discovery. It had the potential to completely reshape how the world understood its most celebrated religious painting. Some might applaud her for it, but there was an equally real possibility that the entire academic establishment could turn against her. The moment the first report on this AI study came out, it sent a wave of excitement rippling across the globe. Initially, the news circulated only within a handful of research groups and university communities. Then someone leaked the preprint onto the internet. What followed was something nobody could have predicted. Within a matter of hours, international media outlets had picked up the story. Major news networks and websites were all posing the very same question. Had artificial intelligence genuinely uncovered a hidden message inside Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece? The BBC even organized a dedicated discussion around the topic. Renaissance history professor James Whitfield was brought in to give his perspective. He stated that if the findings held up, this could rank among the greatest discoveries ever made in the field of art. In his view, the spiral formation and the mathematical structure resembling the golden ratio found within the painting were unlikely to be mere coincidence. The Vatican, for its part, released an official statement several days later. It welcomed new technology and scientific inquiry, while also cautioning people against rushing to conclusions. Many senior figures within the church felt that an interpretation produced by artificial intelligence should not automatically be treated as definitive truth. In Milan, where the painting resides, crowds began to gather. Some demanded that all scans and data be made publicly available, while others maintained that this sacred work of art should be shielded from controversy. Small demonstrations broke out in Florence, and debates erupted over whether technology ought to have any authority to reinterpret religious cultural heritage. The loudest responses of all, however, came from social media. Within just a few days, Da Vinci Decoded had become one of the most widely trending hashtags on the planet. Millions upon millions of people began sharing their views. Some were convinced that Leonardo had belonged to a secret society, while others saw the findings as evidence against organized religion. At the same time, a large number of people argued that the AI had simply been detecting patterns in deteriorating plaster. The debate had by now grown far beyond a single painting. The entire world appeared to be dividing into two camps. On one side stood those who placed their faith in artificial intelligence, and on the other were those who refused to see centuries-old beliefs called into question. And through it all, the central question remained exactly the same. What was the actual truth? After so many rounds of debate, argument, and discussion, Rossi and her team finally arrived at a significant decision. They reasoned that if their discovery was genuine, there was no justification for concealing it, and so they released all of their data to the public. Every scan, every confidence score generated by the AI, and every translation was made available for independent review. The matter was no longer confined to a single laboratory or a single country. Several of the world's most prestigious universities took up the research themselves. Specialists from MIT conducted their own independent analysis of the data. Teams from the University of Amsterdam and Kyoto University then followed, each examining the scans through their own methodologies. A few weeks on, the initial findings made the debate even more compelling. A number of experts concluded that these markings did not correspond to the patterns typically produced by plaster deteriorating over time. Put differently, what was visible might not simply be natural decay. Not everybody was in full agreement, but the nature of the question had shifted. Where people had originally been asking whether anything was truly hidden there, they were now asking something different entirely. If something was indeed hidden there, what did it actually mean? That was the moment a fresh idea emerged, one that people had begun calling the time capsule theory. Certain researchers hold the view that Leonardo did not intend this message for the people of his own era, but rather for generations yet to come. Perhaps he understood that nobody in his century would be capable of grasping it. So he buried it beneath layer after layer of paint, waiting for a time when technology would grow powerful enough for a machine to decipher it. If that turns out to be true, just let that sink in for a moment. Artificial intelligence unlocked a door 500 years later that Leonardo himself had shut. But maybe the story doesn't stop there. A great number of historians are now raising a different question altogether. If a message of this kind could be concealed inside the Last Supper, then might there also be hidden secrets tucked away inside Leonardo's other celebrated works? Could there be some kind of code buried behind the smile of the Mona Lisa? Could the Virgin of the Rocks or the unfinished Adoration of the Magi be holding on to mysteries just like these? At this very moment, some of the greatest museums on the planet, the Louvre, the Uffizi, and the Prado, still have countless paintings by Leonardo and other legendary artists on display. Who can say how many of those works are not merely paintings at all, but messages that have quietly been waiting for centuries to be uncovered? Perhaps the Last Supper is nowhere near the final discovery. Perhaps it is simply the starting point. It may well be the first crack in a door that has long been concealing history's most extraordinary secrets. And now there is one question I want to put to you. If Leonardo truly left these messages behind for people of the future, what do you believe he was trying to prepare us for? And do you think that other great works of art around the world might also be hiding secrets just like these? Go ahead and share what you think down in the comments. And if stories like this one from the pages of history fascinate you, make sure you subscribe to the